Pedro from A&P-Reacts. I'm here today with Henry Lewis of Alien Weaponry to talk about the new record. I'm not going to try to pronounce the name because I know I'm going to butcher it, so I'm going to leave it up to you guys to give me a little bit of a history lesson here and how to pronounce the name of the album correctly. How do you do it?
Pretty much you pretend like you're speaking Japanese. So all the vowels in Māori sound the same. So Tangaroa.
Tangaroa. All right.
R-E-E-O-U.
All right, I think I got
those
it.
vowel sounds, and you always roll your R's as well.
Tangaroa, like that. Was that good
beautiful?
Enough? All right,
beautiful.
Let's talk about this record, but let's not forget about the debut album. So when you look about that record compared to this album, what changed, or did anything change at all as far as your creative process and how you guys tackle this new record?
I feel like our creative process has always been like slightly different from song to song. Like we don't really have a set way of doing things. But I definitely feel like as far as, you know, who we are as, and, you know, obviously we've grown a lot in both aspects. And yeah, I feel like this album was definitely quite different to write because, you know, I guess me personally having a lot of different inspirations and kind of delving into some different stuff from the last album.
How do you see it, Henry, for you, from your side, coming into this record? Did it felt different to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, the album definitely kind of went a lot faster. Like, I think the way, especially the last kind of 10 songs in the album came together, that was like a 6-month period of songwriting. Whereas, you know, with our last album, you're looking at close to about 5 years of different songs on there. So, I mean, this whole album was written in the space of like 2 years, and only 2 of those tracks are really separate from the rest of them, being Blinded and Ahika. So yeah, it's all a much kind of more compressed kind of look at what the band is. So yeah, I feel like it's possibly more cohesive in that sense, but I definitely think we've got a lot of different kind of moods and energies in there as well.
Well, which album is more stressful, the debut record or the album that follows the debut record, considering how successful that debut record was?
I mean, I would say this one. You know, we had all the time in the world to write 2, whereas yeah, this one, it was like, okay, like people are actually waiting for this. They want more. So you know, there was a little bit of pressure there, but again, I think we perform pretty well under pressure, and I mean, I hope people like it as much as I enjoy it. You know, I you know, just over the last year or so, I've been having a lot of fun just showing people I'm close to all of the new mixes every time we get an updated mix and whatnot. So yeah, I'm very excited to see what everyone thinks about this.
Do you guys feel like this album musically is a continuation of 2, or do you go a little bit down a different path as far as the soundscape of this record is concerned?
I think it's an evolution, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like we've got Alien Weaponry roots, but we've changed the recipe up a bit and added some new spices, you know?
How much
spices?
How much of the experience that you guys have, I mean, touring, playing shows all over the world, something that you didn't have in your back pocket when you were putting 2 together, you have that now. How much of that experience impacted your song making process, so that these tracks don't just work well in the studio, but they also work well when you get to play them live?
I definitely think it, you know, doing that will kind of change anyone, to be honest with you. it's kind of hard to, pinpoint exactly in what ways, but I think it's, it's definitely contributed to, our evolution as a band and as musicians, being able to go to festivals, go to all these shows and see all these bands, play live, and kind of see the level of where some of these bands are at. Those were some real eye-opening experiences.
Listen,
Yeah, I mean,
sorry, go ahead.
I think, yeah, some of these tracks were definitely written more with live performance in mind as well. It's something we tried to do with two, but I think we've just gotten better at it with this album. Like, we, after having played shows and done that kind of work and put in that effort, it's kind of like coming back and analyzing what we think works well live as well. So a lot of the tracks on this album, I think, were designed with that kind of headspace of like, how's this going to go down live?
When I was listening to this record, there was something that became, at least to me, a little bit more apparent than it was on two, and that is the fact that this album felt a little bit darker. It felt a little bit more melancholic. It still has a lot of melody. It's still super groovy, but I felt like you guys were not afraid of showing something that perhaps the previous record hit it a little bit, and on this one, those feelings were a little bit more on the forefront, and therefore they impacted a little bit more of the soundscape. Do you guys see this album as a little bit darker in terms of the lyrical content, the atmosphere that the songs have, or that's just me?
Oh, I definitely think you're right in that regard. These songs have so much heavier themes involved, definitely for some of the more personal songs as well. So yeah, I feel like, this album's definitely delved into, I don't know, some more uneasy waters.
I'm just going to switch to my Wi-Fi because you guys keep just freezing. So I'm just going to pop that on.
Yeah, I was just going to say that this record, it's not like that wasn't there before in terms of that darkness. It's just that it became a little bit more apparent. A lot of it, you feel, is driven by the lyrics that you created for the record?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the lyrics and the music, and also probably the main thing would just be, the emotional state of where I was at when writing those songs. I guess over the last little while, I at least have, grown a lot and, seen some quite heavy shit.
Yeah, and definitely that represents in the music. When you look at the sound that this record has, I don't want to call it diverse, but there's definitely changes happening in the soundscape from almost from track to track as you go down the line. How do you manage the volatility that creates in a record, but at the same time allowing the album to still be very cohesive? Like Henry was saying before, this feels like a more cohesive album for him. So how do you match that change and still keep it all together?
I feel like it lets kind of the album breathe a little bit. Like you were saying before, the tracks do kind of do this up and down kind of, you're constantly being moved from place to place, but it lets you breathe a little bit in between some of the heavier and groovier tracks. You've got this kind of, I guess, more deep and emotional side of Lewis's songwriting. So yeah, I mean, I feel like things get to breathe a lot on this album, and like having some of those tracks, the ones like Crooked Monsters and Unforgiving in there, really help that.
I'm glad you mentioned Unforgiving. I don't think you can listen to this album and not pay attention to what that song is doing within the record. It's the longest track on the record. it felt to me that it was such an emotional roller coaster within a track that feels very contained, but it's about to burst. How do you start to put a song like that together? Because it feels very personal, it feels very real and very raw.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of a reflection of you know, some of the shit that I feel sometimes, you know, like I feel like everyone feels it to some extent, you know. It was kind of a representation of, you know, this existential dread that, you know, even if I am happy now, I always have this kind of existential dread that everything's going to fall apart and get ripped to shreds at any second. And I mean, I feel like that was like writing that song, I guess, was a way to kind of release some of that and express some of that, because it's not really something that is easily just about, I guess. And I guess in a way it was kind of writing it as well to relate to other people feeling that way.
Yeah, it just had
some people have therapists. Lewis has music.
in that
I probably
song,
need both, but
that song felt like we were in that therapy room with him. I don't know, Henry, if you feel that way, but when I listen to that track, I feel like I'm a little bit of a fly on the wall, and I get to learn a little bit more about what makes him tick as a person.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, as his brother, you know, it's also something that I guess I'm inherently part of as well. Like, you know, the fact that Lewis is my brother means that we are a huge part of each other's lives. So generally, when one of us is going through shit, it's generally the both of us going through that kind of same emotional roller coaster. So for me, it's nice to have to be able to see that Lewis is letting that out in the way that he does, and I guess it's also somewhat therapeutic for how I feel about the situations as well, because it gives me the sense of security and I guess hope for everything.
And on this record, you guys have a new bass player. I felt like new bass player, nothing changed. Everything still sounded the same. The band, the Alien Weaponry DNA is, you know, it's as it was always been. But how was that change for you guys? How was that process of bringing somebody new into the fold?
So it's actually not Tudunga, our new bassist, on here. So he's been playing with us. He's contributed to the vocals and a guitar piece in Unforgiving on this album. But Ethan actually wrote and recorded the bass for this current album. So this is kind of like Ethan's last chapter with us. He's got his own song on the album where he did all the lyrics, and that's the song Dad. So he's actually yeah, it's a bit of an outlet for him, and it's like the first time he's really written something you know, in full for the album rather than just a piece or a section of a song, which is really cool. So I guess, yeah, album number 3 is really going to be where we see what 2 is like to work with and write songs with. You know, we've been doing some jamming already and just seeing how that all works. I mean, it was one of the things that we kind of went over when we were auditioning for new bass players is, you know, how do we jam together? Mm-hmm. So Tudunga was pretty good with all of that.
Well, that explains the fact that the album felt seamless. You know, it was the same crew behind every single thing. I want to talk about you guys specifically, about what impacts you. And starting off with Henry, like, how did you tackle the drums on this record? Did you have a different game plan for you wanted the drums to sound like? Because I felt that they were slightly different, maybe a little bit more than slightly different from 2.
Yeah, well, I mean, 2 had this kind of open, kind of, I guess, kind of a live sound with what was happening, but it wasn't too in your face. Like, there was no like significant difference in how the drums were recorded over a lot of albums. Whereas with this, I think we kind of wanted it to feel like a more, I guess, raw production as far as that went. Like there's a lot of kind of energy that gets lost when you have really overproduced music. And so for us, like, we wanted to kind of get some of that rawness back, and have some really kind of classic sounds with what we were doing, but kind of a little bit of a modern take on it.
And for you, Lewis, with your guitars, I know the last time I saw you, when you guys were touring in North America here in Toronto, you were at that time dabbing and thinking about, oh, I need another guitar because I want to have some different tuning for some different tracks. And there was some back and forth. You were talking about that. How much changed for you coming into this album? How much did you get to spread your wings as far as the guitar sound on this record?
Well, I managed to convince everyone that we should write a song and drop A. So there's one thing. As far as the guitar sound goes, I'm still using the same amps as I always have, the Marshall DSL JCM 2000s. But yeah, I feel like on this album, there's a lot more playing around with effects, like things like a digital whammy I use quite a bit. I've got a couple like kind of crazy flanges, and of course in Unforgiving, I've got some pretty drawn out delay sounds. But I feel like mostly it was to do with the way I played. I feel like I've become a bit more proggy, a bit more, technical with my style than on the last album.
I definitely noticed that when it came to your guitar playing. When it comes to your vocals, do you feel like you're the narrator of the stories, or do you see the vocals on an Alien Weaponry album different from that?
I feel like it really does depend on the song. I mean, a track like Kaifatu, for example, where we're talking about, something that happened in New Zealand history, it's kind of a different mindset when you're singing that song than something like Unforgiving, which is such a personal song. So, yeah, I feel like it's kind of a mix between, narrating, New Zealand's past, and in between narrating my own mental state.
What song on this record can you guys look back and say that, oh, this was a difficult one, it almost didn't make the album because we just couldn't get it to where we wanted it? Was there a song like that on this record?
I think probably Ehinger.
Ehinger, yeah.
We called that song, it was called Riff Soup.
Even just doing like click track for that track was insane. Like getting the right kind of feel as we did the slow downs and the speed ups. It was like just instrumentally a very difficult track to put together, and then you add the vocals on top of that, which don't. It was quite hard to get all that to mesh with the track and sound good. But I think we did like a really good job on that. And I'm happy it all came together the way it did.
Last question. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna add, that song was like, we were in the studio and the song didn't exist, and we kind of just grabbed a bunch of shit we thought would work together, and we're like, all right, let's and yeah, basically how it came together.
Last question for you guys, and that is, as you've had perhaps now the time to kind of digest this album, is not out there for the fans to digest yet, but you've had a time to experience what the finished product sounds like. What do you feel is the biggest strength of this record?
Ooh, I mean, I guess it's the difference between this record and the last one. I feel like it has, you know, I guess enough to set it apart from the work we've already done. So it's something completely fresh for people to listen to. They're not going to listen to it and go, damn, this sounds a lot like the last album. And I mean, as far as technicality goes as well, I think we really pushed ourselves on this. So I feel like one of the things that's going to happen out of this is, as we play these songs more and more, we're going to be able to move to that next step of what we're able to do as musicians as well.
Louis, do you feel the same way about the strengths of this record, or is there something that specifically speaks to you?
I mean, I definitely agree with what Henry said. I quite like that this album, I feel like we were a bit more brave with some of the things we put on this album, you know. I mean, things like Unforgiving and Crooked Monsters, you know. When I first wrote Unforgiving, I kind of didn't really think it would even end up on the album, because I thought, oh, that's like way different, you know, that's like not even alien weaponry almost. But you know, I actually think it really works, and people who have heard the album so far have told me that track stands out, which is really good to hear. And also, you know, things like E-Hinger, you know, being able to tune the guitars lower than we ever have done before. You know, I've wanted to do that for a long time, and I'm glad that we actually got that on this album.
I have to tell you guys, Unforgiving is one of my favorite songs on the album. So for as different as it sounds, when you first listen to it, like you said, it's almost like, wow, this is alien weaponry. Like, let me double check. As much as it sounds like that, the moment you get used to it and the moment you start going through the record, I don't think you can make the album without it. It's just a phenomenal song that really helps push this album forward. And I hate to use the word mature, but the fact that you guys have been on the road so much, playing so much, supporting the debut record, and growing on the road is really shown on this album, musically and vocally, and from an overall construction. So congratulations for the record.
Thanks,
Sweet.
man.
Thank you, Pedro.
Thank you for taking the time. On that note, all the best with the release, September 17th on Napalm Records. And you guys stay safe, have fun out there, and best of luck. I wish you guys nothing but luck and success with this album.
Sweet. I appreciate it, man. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care, guys.
Ciao.
It is.